So that I want to say that brings me to what I think like one of the best responses to popular culture in this armor is
Mm-hmm.
like, have you ever heard of the female armor bingo?
No.
All right, so I mean, there is a blog. It is called Bikini Armor Battle Damage,
Bikini armor is a
and
whole other thing too.
exactly. So, but
Bikini and
but
speedo armor. Yeah.
so Bikini Armor Battle Damage started doing what they call the female armor bingo, and it is I can give you a link. It's great. I'd highly recommend just reading through their stuff because they make the people who run it make a lot of good points when it comes to design and this and that. But basically, it's hey, does your design for this character put a bingo on this sheet? You might want to reconsider. And after they first released the first female armor bingo, they actually had to release a female armor rhetoric bingo because of the response to it, and it is very ridiculous. Oh yeah. So you want to talk about good examples? I actually do have some a series that has both good examples and bad examples. If you'd like me to go
Mm-hmm.
into detail. So
Yeah.
have you ever played Fire Emblem?
I know of it, but I've not
Oh,
played it.
okay, so Fire Emblem actually has they've had a number of newer games out recently. I'm not familiar with those. I'm sure they have some good examples. The ones I'm
Yeah.
familiar with are Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bad first is that there are still characters in Fire Emblem, female characters that they have, their costumes, definitely accentuate their breasts, and they have a lot of boob sock. And there's some females that wear armor that is very much shaped to their breasts. Can't help it. The worst thing that most of Fire Emblem female characters have going for them is that, and this is a little off topic for that, but they don't get pants.
What?
Like, if you are a female character in Fire Emblem and you're not a class that wears armor, you are basically going to have thigh-high boots and hot pants or stockings and a skirt, and then that's it.
See, that's stupid. I mean, like, well, granted, we all, when we do our shows, we try to wear what's most comfortable to us, but we also have to limit ourselves with historical situations. So obviously, depending on the situation, not being Scottish, because stupid, obviously not Scottish armor, but or Viking or otherwise, quote unquote, barbarian, where women are allowed to wear pants or whatever they want. Women are forced by historical matter to wear a skirt or a dress or skirt. It's you know what I mean.
Yeah.
A long
Not
skirt
that it's a bad thing.
Dress.
I would say a lot of our fighters kick butt in dresses.
Absolutely. However,
I respect them for that.
No, exactly. But the point I'm trying to come up with in that regard is it's not as comfortable fighting in that and having to hike up all the time or having to pull or it's not practical. Obviously, they would have done that historically speaking because that's what they would have worn. But women back then and now and in entertainment should be allowed to wear just as men wore loose-fitting pants like breeches. Now, of course, in my sense, I completely admit the crime of wearing non-historical armor with my leather suede tabard, but because obviously there's very little evidence of heavy leather armor use, right? That we know of, at least at the moment.
What we know at the moment, yes, there's a little evidence of that, but there are some evidence that can tie to leather armor being the armor of a poor warrior in the Viking periods. Now, granted, leather's not going to last long enough for us to see the historical examples, but there are some who believe that in the Viking period, the poor or Viking raider might have been wearing leather or gambeson. Though, of course, if you were rich, it was chainmail.
Yeah, or you just so happen to be lucky to pick that off at battle. You know, I'm pretty sure that was probably a majority of it. Is if you killed someone or came across a body, you just grab their armor.
Oh, absolutely! You just take that off because, believe it or not, a lot of the chain mail from like the time of the Dark Ages, even to some of the medieval ages, was just old Roman lorca hamadas that had sleeves added to them.
Right. And I think that's also a facet people don't quite understand in terms of all this armor. Both, one, the argument against suggestive armor, and the media or the entertainment industry that just puts all this breasts and codpiece stuff out there willy-nilly, is that armor like that would be very expensive. I don't mean armor, I mean like legit covering things up but making it look like the body. All of that stuff would be very expensive. Not everyone,
insanely expensive.
Not everyone's even going to be able to afford chainmail.
No, and that was expensive enough as it is. And most armor would just be simple, like I said, simple bell shape that's meant to protect and cover things up.
Also, I happen to be a better proponent for padded armor and brigandine than, say, plate and leather and just plain cloth. I think padded really does the trick for you. It's cheap. It's obviously, well, it's padded.
Padded was the cheap man's armor. It was simple stuff. And the thing that most people don't know is even at long distances, it could stop arrows from long distances. Now, it's not going to stop a determined thrust or arrows at closer ranges, but for keeping you alive, sometimes, thick padded armor was a good defense. And that's a reason why a lot of people got a hold of it. And even underneath the chainmail and the plate and the brigandine, people would still be wearing that padded armor because it would cushion and disperse some of the blow.
Exactly. It's like putting like a magic +1 armor ability on your D&D character. Is you start off with padded armor and then you put everything else on, rather than putting on leather or cloth or so. But even as a message to the entertainment industry of whom are doing this bikini armor garbage, if you just put like a burqa or a generic tunic or any shirt or pants, whatever, even just basic cloth is much more protection than bikini armor and much more protection than nudity. And
Absolutely. I mean, from a cultural standpoint, there were some groups that did that kind of stuff. The nudity part, not the bikini play.
Obviously there's cultures that fight in the nude. That's weird, but that's a culture that does it. But
I mean,
we're talking about
they
entertainment.
didn't win against guys and gals wearing heavy armor who had their vitals protected because, well, sometimes it was a religious belief they had. Sometimes some looked at a practical belief because cloth, when you stab through that, pieces of the cloth can be driven into the wound, which increases the chances of infection.
Chain links.
Chain links getting driven in. I'll do it as well. So some saw it as, hey, rather than risking that, if I'm going to get cut, I'm going to try and reduce my chances of infection. But from my standpoint and from many other groups' standpoints, I think, because we see this over time, they'd much rather have that protection, especially when you're in melee fighting range. Now, we know eventually firearms and stuff made it impractical.
From an entertainment perspective, that would be your Street Fighter, your Mortal Kombat, your Assassin's Creed type of situation where it's going to be melee. So these characters really should be wearing armor of some sort.
Now, in the Mortal Kombat case, I can see them wearing things more like a tournament geese, ninja outfits, or certain things. Now, I know in the original game, Liu Kang was supposed to be like the Bruce Lee character. Johnny Cage was supposed to be like a Jean-Claude Van Damme. And all the others were supposed to be
just
like
whatever.
Whatever. Your generic ninjas. And originally Sonya Blade, she was your token female. But wasn't quite always necessary. Hold on a moment. I probably move into the conference room rather quickly.
So Fire Emblem, plenty of bad examples, but there are actually some very good examples. One of my favorite is this character named Titania, and let me I'll find you a picture of her because
I got her up.
Okay, and if you look, she the style of armor across Fire Emblem, especially in Radiant Dawn Path Radiance, it's very similar. You have The cuirass is this heavy piece on the chest, a collar, shoulder pads, a smaller plate piece protecting the stomach. And what I really enjoy about Fire Emblem armor is that you can look at one of these characters and look at the rest and like, okay, so it looks like it's made all the same, right?
Yeah.
And Titania is a character where it's like her the one thing, like some of the images in the game, her talking portrait, especially the shading's a little weird. And
I'm looking at a picture of her in a white and black dress, and she's got kind of the bikini white looking thing.
Let me see.
And she's got fitting silk.
You might not be looking at one of the from the actual games. There's one. She shows up in Heroes, I think, and different stuff. But here is the actual. Throw a link in the production room.
Okay, gotcha. That is not what I'm looking at.
Yeah, no, it might
same
be
character, but not at all.
Right, but if you like, I really like her design, because if you look at her armor, it's for Fire Emblem. It fits what you'd find even the nameless fodder knights wearing.
Mm-hmm.
The style is the same. It might be a little fancier, but it's a little fancy because that's who she is as a character.
Yeah,
but
I mean, the fact that she is a female comes across. It's not the armor that makes it come across. It's the fact that she's a female character. So the armor is just armor. The armor is very. Well, I don't know anything about Fire Emblem except that I know about it. Know of it. But I mean, she looks practical, completely practical. Except obviously her thighs are open. If she were to do whatever.
Well, she's a mounted character, so that's a little
That's completely different because then you got the protection of the horse.
Mm-hmm. And I actually really like it on the folds on her sides. It works. It works.
Yeah, on a horse, that looks like they would be practical to covering the thighs.
And this is I want to say she's a very good example of how female armor can be done on a character.
Mm-hmm. Where you clearly see that she's female, but it's not because of her armor.
Right. It's because of it's her.
Mm-hmm.
And just I love her design so much. She's definitely a character I would very much love to try and cosplay at some point.
So that is completely, in my opinion, the idea of what they should be going for. It should be one, it should be practical. Two, everyone should be able to wear it. If it is a tailor-made outfit to that character, and that character happens to be female and perhaps a larger bust, it should still be subtle and respectable and practical.
Mm-hmm.
This one, it's curved there, the cuirass, so she could have a small or larger bust, and it doesn't matter. It's still doing the job.
Mm-hmm. Because especially that's part of the build, how the armor in this series in this Fire Emblems is built, is that it's this there's larger chest piece, there's a smaller collar piece, and then there's a shoulder protection, and
it's a broad curve, which now granted, booby plate armor, if you want to call it that, or breastplate armor, technically would be as practical as a helmet to a jouster, right?
Right.
However, a lot of that kind of armor on women is usually bikini armor, or their stomach is open or something of that nature, and it just looks ridiculous.
So now on the flip side, I love Titania. Here's another character. This is Jill. She's a dragon rider in in the same games, and her. Well, I love it, but I also hate it. You can see that the design and the armor follows the same sort of thinking. The chest piece, the shoulder pads.
The general idea.
Yeah. But the problem with Jill's is that you can see where it starts getting a lot frippier. There's a lot more chest accentuation. And I love this character sheet because it also...
well, the guy has that same thing too, though.
Right, the guy has the same thing too. But if you look at just the comparison of their armor... Which one looks like they could take the hit better?
For me, from looking at the top one here, the top corner, she has openings where you can put a dagger or a sword.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas he does not have that. You can still put a dagger or a sword in that same location if he lifted his arms, but you can do that to her without her lifting her arms.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, the one thing about this armor, it doesn't have the protection on the armpits. I can't remember the rondelles that you'd find on historical armor, but this is one of those. I like her armor as well, but Har is the guy character. His armor definitely looks a lot more functional.
Practical, yeah.
Yeah.
And then my next comment would be in the next image, obviously across. I think it looks like she's got slightly baggy legs. Probably not. I don't know. But the one with the gray pants is her entire back is completely opened up from the small of her back down. Whereas, though that is the same with him, it looks like he is wearing. It looks like he's wearing loose, baggy pants, breeches, basically, and something else that is obviously part of the sash he's wearing.
I think it's part of a tabard that he's wearing.
Yeah, so that is also another layer of protection that she does not have. She basically just has her
It's a shame, and you can see this on Titania as well, is that one of the things I really enjoy about Fire Emblem armor is that there's definitely a layering going on here. In the top left, you see, she has some leather on, some more leather going on, especially on her thighs. And she's another mounted character, but I love that
she doesn't look like she doesn't have as much protection as he does, at least in the top left image.
Yeah.
Everything else, she's got protection, and it looks better. But the top left one is the one I have an issue with.
Yeah, but that's also kind of part of the thing with Fire Emblem is that the armor changes from rank to rank.
Okay.
So you can kind of see that a little bit. I don't think this is the final.
I guess in a way that technically does make sense if you have less armor when you're starting out like a squire, and then you continue to gain pieces whether you have money or take it. However, in a video game, you and I know.
The overall is that the overall is like the design. As I said, production wise, you can look at these armors and say these were probably built by the same culture, by blacksmiths who were trained similarly. But also, Har's design is much more it's not 100% more practical, but it feels much more practical as a soldier's armor than Jill's armor does.
Yeah.
But I would definitely recommend looking into Fire Emblem just because there's other characters where it's like here's some good examples, here's some bad examples of here's soldiers and here's units that are supposed to be archers and whatnot. And the designs are always really interesting and fun to look at.
Yeah. And then let's quickly discuss what they should be wearing, from a historical and fantasy perspective. Like, obviously, we know what they wore historically in medieval England, but around the world there's differences. However, let's stick to what we know, at least in terms of what we do. But they had all with these characters that have bikini armor, historically speaking, just put a tunic on them. Just put a tunic and pants. I mean, if they're a peasant, that's what they would have worn. Even just a tunic is going to protect you. For
a peasant, you'd have padded armor and a helmet. You'd be lucky to have the helmets.
Yeah, if any of that, right?
Right.
You would at least, however, have clothing. You would at least have maybe 1 or 2 layers of clothing, and that alone is still protection, and that alone still will differentiate male from female if you are trying to differentiate.
Yeah, I personally love historically based suits and things that are meant to look historical. That was kind of one of the things that really disappointed me in like the 300 movie series is here you got all these guys in the buff, and I'm like, where's their bronze armor? All I'm seeing is a helmet, greaves, and a Speedo.
Or Vikings, which are wearing horn helmets, fur and leather armor. They have dirt on their faces, and you're like, well, they technically should just be in cloth and chainmail.
Yeah, cloth and chainmail, and the traditional Viking helmet had that little eyepiece that hanged over them.
It looked like an owl.
Yeah, and some would have a chainmail wrapping around there to conceal their whole head and hide it, but that was one of the more expensive type helmets, usually worn by the Jarl and all. And there's that one. And even seeing women going out there basically wearing chain coverings on their boobs and crotch, aka bikini plates, but nothing covering the midsection, nothing covering their upper her legs, basically all the vital areas, because you got the femoral artery up there. Now, even in standard plates, that spot's always going to be open, but I'd like to see a pair of cuisses. I'd like to see somebody on with a breastplate that doesn't just cover their boobs and cleavage, but actually comes down and covers all that vital stuff.
You see, the worst thing about that too is that a lot of design for female armor, when it comes to, okay, well, this is something heavy and padded they're wearing. Well, wait, we still need to we still need to accentuate the breast.
No,
and
exactly, no. See, cloth, chainmail to some extent, and brigandine to some extent. Brigandine to some extent is going to accentuate the body curves, the curves of the body itself, not the gender, but the body.
Mm-hmm.
Padded armor is not going to do that.
Yeah, no.
And it doesn't need to. The purpose of padded armor is just to be padded armor.
Yeah. And when you talk about layers of armor, is that even with some sort of plate chest piece, plate cuirass, you're still going to have at least 2 layers of padding under there.
Exactly.
And making it and drawing it, designing it so that it's like, well, it's very form-fitting to this female character. It kind of takes away the suspension of disbelief is the term I'm thinking here.
Yeah, and it's clearly you made this for sexualizing or sexualized reasons, as opposed to being functional armor.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I want to say. Like, this is, I am not 100%. Oh, boob plate is bad. It's like if the design is bad, I'm going to say this design is bad.
Yeah,
you either accept it,
yeah,
or you don't come up and say, you don't try and argue. It's like, oh well, this is how the culture is, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, the design is bad.
No, exactly. And the culture argument is stupid because if it's fantasy, then clearly it was made for sexual reasons. If it's supposed to be historical, then
it's just not historical.
Yeah, you didn't do your research.
Yeah, it's like, if you're going to make armor for people, make it where it looks, well,
practical.
Exactly. And it's one of the reasons what got me involved in For Honor initially. I love the suits of armor there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, there are some things where you can tell, okay, that's a female character, that's a male character, but the armor types are still conforming. And some of the times, from a distance, take the Orochis, for example, on the samurai side in that game. Unless you're looking real closely, if you're just taking a glance look, you can't tell the difference between the male and the female until you look closely.
And that's how it should be.
Exactly.
Right. Because, in a practical sense, like I said, sex, gender, it technically doesn't matter. You can showcase it if that's the kind of person you are. But I think the idea is really, historically speaking, it was people with money and flair for the fantastic and theatric that were wearing these just absolute, I can't come up with a word, it's hitting me, but these obvious flamboyant pieces of armor that are just ridiculous.
Yeah,
and it's not, it should not relate that people with money to these characters and people.
To give an idea on
don't.
What you'd be paying with when you were buying one of these suits of armor, everyone's saying that's basically the equivalent to buying one of the modern day really expensive sport cars that cost you $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be part of the cost. The other part of the cost would be buying also a well-tailored suit. And I've once bought a well-tailored suit, and just buying the suit before I had to have some adjustments done to it still, but just the suit itself was $1,500, and then I had to pay another $200 to get the final details done so it fit me absolutely to a T. So then it's like you're adding that cost on top of the materials and machinery cost of the car, and then you've got this, and that's what would be like buying a suit of armor in the time period. So yeah, you had to be filthy rich.
Right, and you had to have a blacksmith that can do that. So I really don't think all these video games that have the sexualized armor for men and women understand that. Obviously, I don't think they, hot take, I don't think people in the entertainment industry actually do any research, historically speaking,
Well, I think a lot of them just think one thing: sex sells. So
this looks cool, or this is what people think this is. Again, hot take on like Jurassic Park and Vikings looking the same.
Well, again, also
throughout
on the sexualization thing, throwing in on what they do with men sometimes, like these, because everyone also loves a man with big arms, so they throw these oversized like
300
pieces and arm pieces on their armor.
Broad armor, thick chest, pecs.
Broad armor, chest, pecs, the 300 stuff. And it's like, that's the same category. And it's like, why don't you just do the practical thing rather than over-sexualizing it? And like I say, they do it on both sides of the industry. Women more than men, but you do see it there. And it's like, take Scorpion and Sub-Zero in that. These guys they've got that still big, thick look, but they'd be more... Their body types would be more like your standard martial artist. It's athletic, but it's not overly busted. I did like the fact that they showed their faces, but the sides of their tunics, they're opened up so you can see those rippling muscles, and it's like, lift that up.
Yeah, like why not more characters like Raiden from the movie, or the character Bo Raicho from the 3D era, who was a larger set guy, wearing nothing but just like monks' clothing and stuff like that. That's more realistic. That's more, I think, what people of a serf or peasant station would be wearing. Yeah. And then apply that to pretty much anyone that could be of that nature.
Now, for like Liu Kang and Johnny Cage, I can give it to them that
because they're
one of them was supposed to be like the Jean-Claude Van Damme like character who
they're in that specific culture where you've got the shirt off and the loose pants.
So he's got the pants, shirt off, and the other was supposed to be the Bruce Lee like character again, shirt off with the Tai Chi Taekwondo pants.
But that said, I like the movie version of Johnny Cage better, where he looks like an actor, where he's got a button-down shirt and pants.
I liked that look. That looked awesome. I loved it. And honestly, even the Liu Kang one where he had like the tank top shirt.
Just put a tank top on him.
Yeah,
put a loose shirt.
I mean,
even for men in a practical setting, being topless is not going to protect you from, especially if we're talking about video games, where Mortal Kombat aside, you got all that magic and stuff, but you've got weapons that could be guns, that could be knives, swords, cannons, whatever, coming at you. Even cloth is going to protect you from men and women. Not very well, but at least a piece of cloth that's loosely fitting is going to help you glance that dagger strike or that sword strike or the thrust. Whereas this boob plate or no armor up top is just completely open.
Absolutely. I mean, even the cheapest person who could get something to cover their chest and head, they will cover their chest and head because that's your most vital areas. The rest of it, if you can afford it, okay. If you can't, well, that's how it happened.
Just steal some chainmail off somebody.
Exactly. Just steal some chainmail off somebody.
Follow the king to battle.
Follow the king to battle, survive it, find a dead guy, find a suit of chainmail that's mostly intact, and take it off the corpse. Don't try that with plate because it's not going to fit you.
And the honest truth is that half of people consuming pop culture are women, and most women...
Half the population is women.
I mean, yeah. And actually, fandom has a long history of being mostly driven by women. Women save Star Trek, yo. Women, some of the first fanfic, some of the first sci-fi authors were women. And you want to consider that when you start designing your characters. Look at Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones and how she's a great character. Not, there's a whole other thing to be said about the HBO Game of Thrones, but Gwendolyn Christie is God, but that's just me. She's still an interesting character.
Gwendolyn Christie in Star Wars.
Yes.
Where the armor she's wearing, let me pull that up.
Yeah, where she's Captain Phasma's. She has the typical Stormtrooper armor, even if it's very shinier.
Because it was made from Padme Amidala's ship.
I thought it was Palpatine's personal cruiser thing.
I don't know. Who knows what's going on in sequels? But if you look at her armor, she just looks like a stormtrooper wearing chrome armor.
Yeah, and there's this whole thing about, and just the design you put across, the intention that you put into that design. Are you making sexy females in this what you're creating just because you think it's the only way to appeal to people, to get them to watch your stuff or to play your game? And it really does need to stop.
Right. So I think the idea really should not be, we shouldn't be angry at people who are making practical armor and making an attempt to make subtle practical differences in terms of what a man would wear and what a woman would wear. Obviously, they're going to wear the same stuff otherwise, but if they wear something slightly to them, as long as it's respectable and practical, I think that's fine, like the Mandalorian. But I think really the argument should be people who are making armor on both genders, but obviously this is specifically targeting women because they do get that hit more than men. That needs to stop. But otherwise, there's a rich history in our culture all over the world with armor.
There are so many women who actually went into battle, not just the Amazons. I mean, Eleanor of Aquitaine, she practically ran a combat nurse group in the Second Crusade.
Was it going into the Viking era? Was it her name? I'm trying to think. It wasn't Ethel Fled. There's 10,000 Ethels. This is going to be a running thing on this podcast. We're going to go through every Ethel. I'm talking about Alfred's daughter, the one who married to Mercia, who ended up fighting in battle and gaining the respect of the Vikings.
I can't remember her. I'm now going to have to look it up.
Yeah, no. I can't remember her name. I don't know if it was Ethel something. I mean, we're in a digital era. Let me just take a quick second. I'll Google it up.
Another one I can actually tell you, I can't remember her name off the back of my head, but it was Robert Guiscard's second wife. She was from Italy, and during his invasion of the Byzantine Empire, she actually commanded and helped him rally troops in the battle. Now, they don't know if she actually fought, though I'd have to think she might have done some fighting, but she was on the front lines with her husband, dressed in a full suit of armor, fighting the Byzantines.
Exactly, and that's awesome. Elfwin is the name of Alfred's daughter. Elfwin was she was just right in the battle. She was doing what back then was shunned. Women obviously were not supposed to be in battle, but the ones that did kicked butt, and they wore whatever everybody else was wearing.
Okay, it's Sikelgaita. I don't know how to pronounce it. Probably, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's medieval pronunciation beyond our normal modern.
Absolutely,
ears.
But she went with her husband on multiple fights. They stood side by side in battle. She wore armor. She was a fighter.
And you don't hear about any of these actual historical female warriors wearing booby plate or exposed stomachs or anything like that, or bikinis.
No, none of that. They wore, granted, most of them were in, like I usually call it, the chainmail period, which is like, here's your chainmail shirts, throw it on.
There you go.
Good, you're ready to go.
Oh, it fits you cool. Oh, it doesn't? Here, just take off a couple links.
Exactly. Or, here, let's add a couple more links. Let's split it, add a couple more links. There, it fits you.
Or we can discuss armor all day long in terms of make and model stuff, but
I can discuss
pretty
all
much.
the different types.
Yeah.
Like I said, plate, my personal favorite. Chainmail, everybody knows that. Lamellar armor, that's one that people. This is laminar armor,
as opposed to laminated.
Yeah, the difference between lamellar and laminar. Lamellar is a bunch of little plates sewn together like a scale thing, only without a backing behind it. Whereas laminar, if you're familiar with the Roman segmentata, that is laminar. It's bands of armor.
Right.
Bands of metal.
Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything several times in wraparounds.
And I think we've been repeating it over and over again.
Mm-hmm. So that is it for this podcast. We had Colin here, who's fought in plate mail as well as other kind of armor as well, so he understands what it's like being in that. and of course the War Queen. And that is it for this episode. We will see you the next time.
See ya.
All right, have a good one.